On today's show, the Cavs have won 12 straight games, and I'll tell you exactly what I think is the most impressive part of this winning streak. Plus, they just got done playing a couple of teams they could see in the first round of the playoffs. We'll look at what those matchups look like and who would the Cavs prefer to play in the opening round. We'll talk about that and so much more on today's edition of Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? My name is Danny Cunningham. You might know me from my time covering the Cleveland Cavaliers. Places like 92.3 The Fan, my Substack, The Inside Shot, Cleveland Magazine, and a number of other stops along the way. I want to say thank you to you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts. Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Drop us a 5-star rating. Leave us a nice review. Be a friend. Tell a friend about Locked On Cavs. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure a friend is subscribed as well. And if you're watching the show on YouTube, do me a favor. Hit that thumbs up button for me. Click subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. A proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show, of course, brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. The Cleveland Cavaliers have won 12 straight games. It has happened 3 times this season. There have been 4 12-game winning streaks or more in the NBA the entire season. The Cavs are responsible for 3 of them. Oklahoma City, of course, has the other one. They have a 15-game winning streak. The Cavs have a 15-game winning streak now. 2 12-game winning streaks. They play tonight. Could push to 13 with a win against Charlotte. I would expect that to happen. But I do think that with how the Cavs have been playing lately, it's a good time to talk about what is really impressive about this 12-game winning streak, because I don't think that they've been playing a steady brand of basketball the whole time. And I don't know if this is the same exact team. I know it's not the same exact team because DeAndre Hunter is here, Christopher and George Niang are not. Like, this is a different team than the one that went on these long winning streaks earlier in the year. And I think it's a fun thing to look at. It's a fun thing to break down. So first of all, during this 12-game stretch, the Cavs have a net rating of plus 15.4. They are outscoring opponents by 15.4 points per 100 possessions. As you would imagine, that is the best mark in the NBA in that time span, dating back to, I believe February 5th or February 6th was the first win. It was that game Darius Garland hit a buzzer beater against Detroit. That was when this winning streak started, all the way back before the trade deadline. It has been a long time since that's happened. And what I ultimately find the most impressive thing about this streak is that this has been really I think the best way to define how great this Cavs team has been this winning streak. And I wrote about this over at the Inside Shot the other day after the game against Miami. But there are a couple of ways, I think, to define greatness. Like, there are a couple of traits that great teams have that the Cavs have really shown repeatedly that they have. And the first one is being able to reach a level that other teams can't. And the Cavs have, during the streak, I think, shown that. You think back to that game against Orlando when they won that game by 40 points, and I don't even know if it felt that close. The game against the New York Knicks where they won that game by almost 40 points, and it didn't feel that close. And they really, I think, did a good job of sending a message, beating a team like Minnesota by 21, and then taking care of business and dominating lesser opponents in the way that they have in the games against, Toronto and Brooklyn. Maybe not quite as dominating as you would like, but they've shown that. Like, they have the ability to find a gear that I don't think other teams have. Now, Oklahoma City has it and Boston has it too. Those 2 teams also possess this ability, but I think if you look at the other 27 teams in basketball, and maybe the Lakers will, I can't rule them out, but I haven't seen enough of them. They play the Knicks tonight. I'm recording this before that game begins, so I don't know what happens there. But maybe the Lakers will show that they have that extra gear they can get to with LeBron and Luka playing together. I just haven't seen enough of them yet to say that they do or don't. But I know for sure that the Cavs, Thunder, and Celtics do. And that is one of the things that stands out to me about this, is that they have, in some of the games during the streak against lesser teams, they've absolutely found that next gear and throttled opponents. I mean, the Orlando game, I think, is a great example of that, where that was, I think, a really big game for Orlando. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, this is a measuring stick game for the Cavs, because it's not. The Orlando Magic are not the team that anyone expected them to be before the season. I know that there were people out there that thought the Magic were going to have a better year than the Cavs after those two teams faced off in the first round of the playoffs last year. And obviously, those two teams have gone in two very, very different directions. And a lot of that for Orlando has to do with the injury bug that has hit them this year. But the fact that the Cavs went to Orlando and won a game by 40 in a game that they could have won by 60 if they felt like it, that speaks to how dominant this team can be, and that they have this extra gear they can get to. And, they won that game without Darius Garland even playing. Like, they're also, I guess that's a third thing too, that I hadn't really thought of, that I will now talk about, is the injury aspect of this. So a sign of a great team, first and foremost, like, you have to be able to go out and be great. You have to have a ceiling that is higher than what most, if not all, other teams have. And I think the Cavs qualify that for the season. And I think we've seen that during the winning streak, because they've had those moments. And even, the Boston game, I think probably qualifies there too. They got off to just a wretched start, but in the final 42 minutes of that game, they outscored the Celtics by 29 points. Like, that was a game where if you just, and of course, all 48 minutes count. You can't do this. Like, you can't just pick and choose. But let's say that you could. If you look at the final 42 minutes of that game, it was not close. Like, the Cavs were at a much different level of basketball for the vast majority of that game. It's just they played so poorly at the start that it was a close game, as opposed to them going into Boston and blowing the Celtics out. Like, I think that game was actually, and maybe this is a galaxy brain take, I don't think it is, but I think that game in Boston last Friday, so a week ago at this point, was closer to being a blowout win for the Cavs than it was being a blowout win for the Celtics, which is crazy to say, because the Celtics are the ones that had 22-point lead in that game, not the Cavs. So I think that is the one thing that really stands out to me about this streak and about this season for the Cavs, and explains their greatness. And I think why this 12-game sample size is a good summation of it. The other thing, aside from the injuries, which I will get to, is great teams also have the ability to find ways to win when they're not playing well. And there's not been a team in NBA history that has played really well 82 times in a season. It has never happened. The 73-9 Warriors didn't happen for them. Go look at their 9 losses. Like, they lost a game by like 30 points to Portland that year. They did not play their best basketball every single night. Now, far more often than not, they did. And I think it's fair to say with the Cavs, far more often than not, they've been really good, if not great, on a regular basis. But I think it's fair to say that in the last 3 games in particular, the game against Portland, the game against Miami, the game against Chicago, like, that's not the best version of Cavs basketball that we've seen. I think it's probably fair to say that they, particularly against Miami, maybe a little bit better against Chicago because they went on that run in the fourth quarter. And Portland, give them credit. Portland has been playing much better lately. But I think that the Cavs have kind of played for the last week since the Boston game, kind of had their C- game. And if, just to pick another random team here. So let's go the Indiana Pacers, who have played really good basketball since the calendar flipped from 24 to 25. If they play their C- game, their winning percentage is probably around 30%. Like, if they have a C- game over the last week, the schedule that the Cavs have just had, where they've not played great teams, but they've played teams that have a pulse. It's not like they've played the Washington Wizards 3 straight games or the Utah Jazz. So say that your replacement level playoff team, so your above average team, the Indiana Pacers are the great example here. And that was no shade to Indiana. They're just the first mid-level playoff team that popped into my mind. If they play their C- game, I don't think they go 3-0 in the stretch that the Cavs just had. They probably lose to Portland, and they probably lose that game to Miami. They might still beat Chicago. And the Cavs, because of their greatness, and they have this knack for finding a way to win. And I think that is another sign of a great team. And again, it's not going to happen every single night. But when watching the Portland game, it never felt like, sitting there in the arena, it never felt like, oh, the Cavs are going to lose this game. They were down big. I think they trailed by 18 with a minute left in the third quarter. But I never sat there. It's like, you know what? The Cavs are just going to find a way because that's what they've done all season. And that's what great teams do. They're going to find a way to win this game. Against Chicago, they were tied with 7 minutes left. And it's just like, there was never any doubt that the Cavs were going to win that game. I did feel that doubt against Miami. Like I was sitting, I'm like, you know, I just don't know that the Cavs are going to get this done because Bam Adebayo kept hitting big shot after big shot. The Cavs couldn't really solve Miami's zone defense. And yet here we are talking about a 12-game winning streak because the Cavs are a great team. And despite having their C- efforts on a Wednesday night in March, they found a way to win because that is what great teams do. And that's what the Cavs have done consistently, not only during the streak, but really throughout the season. If you look at some of the games, some of the wins they have, they've not played. So they've won 52 games. They've not played great 52 times. No, I don't think a team ever plays great 52 times. And that's just, it is what it is. But the fact that they have found ways to win games that I think average to good teams don't win. Like I think an average to good team does not beat Miami on Wednesday with the Heat holding a 7-point lead. Now you can also say maybe they're just better from the jump, but third game in 4 nights against a team that threw a very devastating wrinkle against the Cavs. Even though Miami was shorthanded, and they deserve a ton of credit for that. But I don't think an average to good team wins that game. I think it needed a great team to find a way to win that game. And I think that really both ends of the spectrum there speak to the greatness that the Cavs have. And I think that has been on display all throughout the streak. And then also winning games without the top players. Because if you look through the course of this streak, so Darius Garland got hurt against the New York Knicks, did not play against Memphis. The Cavs still won against a pretty good team. Did not play against Orlando. The Cavs won by 40 against a very average to maybe slightly below average team. But winning those games without an all-star, that deserves to be mentioned. Everybody was healthy against Boston. They had to come back and beat Portland in overtime, but Donovan Mitchell didn't play in that game. Did they look great the entire time against Chicago? No. Evan Mobley didn't play in that game against the Bulls. So like that is something too that the Cavs have been able to, and they're not injuries because those guys have been out for rest purposes, but the Cavs have been able to find a way to get by when not only are they not at their best, but they also don't have everybody available. Like your margin for error just gets a little bit smaller when you're missing an all-star player, as the Cavs have had 3 times in this 12-game winning streak. And that matters. Like that is worth talking about. And I just think that's another sign of the greatness for this team. Now, I mentioned they played Miami. I mentioned they played Chicago. They played Orlando recently. All 3 of those teams look like they're going to be in the play-in picture. If you're in the play-in picture, you could be a potential opponent for the Cleveland Cavaliers in the first round. We are going to rank the 4 teams that I think will be in the play-in as far as who would the Cavs most want to see? Who would the Cavs most want to avoid? We'll do that next right here on Locked On Cavs. Today's show brought to you by Prize Picks. Basketball season is heating up, and there's no better way to get in on the action than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With Prize Picks, you just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. It's easy to use, available in over 30 states, and lets you mix and match projections across different sports. Maybe you want to select Luka Doncic for more than 25 points in his new uniform, or Jason Tatum for more than 8 rebounds, as the Celtics a little shorthanded in their game against Philadelphia on Thursday. I don't know what Tatum's final line was, but he's been rebounding the heck out of the basketball lately. And, Prize Picks makes it simple because you can set your lineup in less than 60 seconds and you get to stay engaged all game long. And when you win, your money hits your account in as little as 15 minutes. You don't have to be waiting around to get paid. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA. That is LOCKEDON NBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNBA for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Drop us a 5-star rating. Leave us a nice review. Be a friend. Tell a friend about Locked On Cavs. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure a friend is subscribed as well. So as of right now, the Cavs are, of course, the only team in the NBA that has clinched a spot in the playoffs. They have done so because they've been incredible all year. And the fact that they clinched a playoff spot on March 5th, I think is wildly impressive. It's not much to celebrate for this team per se, but I do think it's something that's very, very impressive. So they are going to be the 1 seed. As of right now, the Celtics just wrapped up a win over Philly. As I record this, it's about 10 o'clock on Thursday night. And Boston is 7.5 games back behind the Cavs, including 8 games in the loss column. That is not getting made up. In the 20 games left, I would be surprised. I would be stunned considering what this year has been. I would be stunned if the Cavs lost 8 of their 20 remaining games. If that happens, the Boston Celtics would need to go undefeated. And then I'm not even sure the tiebreaker situation. So really, the Cavs need to play 500 level basketball, and the Celtics need to go undefeated for them to pass the Cavs and get the 1 seed. In other words, that ain't happening. So that means, and both of these teams will be the top 2 seeds. It's New York is not catching Boston. There's a 4-game gap there. The Celtics are going to be 2. The Cavs are going to be 1. So the Cavs are going to face the number 8 seed, which of course is determined by the play-in tournament that comes the week between the end of the regular season and the start of the playoffs. The 4 teams that will be in the play-in, because I don't foresee the Brooklyn Nets rising up into 10th, and I do not foresee the Miami Heat rising up to 6th. The 4 teams are Miami, Atlanta, Orlando, and Chicago. Now, there's going to be a race to watch. If you're a Cavs fan, the race to watch really is the race for the 8 seed, because there's going to be right now, and I believe that Atlanta beat Indiana tonight, and that game has gone final. So Orlando is a half game behind the Atlanta Hawks as I record this. And Orlando lost to Chicago tonight. So Miami is in 7th, Atlanta is in 8th, Orlando is in 9th, and Chicago is in 10th. The Cavs will be playing one of those 4 teams. Of the 4 teams, I do think that the team the Cavs most would want to see is the Chicago Bulls. This is not being disrespectful to Chicago. This is not being disrespectful to the Bulls. The Bulls are the worst team in that group. And I think there's a pretty wide gap between them and the next worst team. I think that Chicago doesn't necessarily do anything all that well. Now, they play at a fast pace and they shoot a ton of threes, but I don't think that's going to be something for that specific team that translates really well into a postseason series against one of the best defenses in the NBA, because the Cavs have been during this winning streak. And the thing, as you know, if you listen to the show every day, that I've been monitoring is how have they fared since DeAndre Hunter started playing. And since that has happened, they've been one of the 5 best defenses basketball. And that is something that I do think matters. So would Chicago be able to score enough against the Cavs? Probably not. I don't see that happening. Would Chicago be able to stop the Cavs defensively? Would the Chicago Bulls be able to slow down the best offense in NBA history? No, I don't see that happening. I think that Chicago is the team that is the least likely. And to be clear here, I don't believe any of these teams could upset the Cavs, but it's about the level of difficulty in the series. If you're the Cavs, and if you are a Cavs fan that is not new to this, if you remember what life was like during the second LeBron tenure, what did they want to do? They wanted to sweep the first round. They wanted the series to be as short as possible every single time. And if you were the Cavs this year, I do think there's a real opportunity to have a short series in the first round and a short series in the second round. I think that at this point, I would pick them to beat the Boston Celtics in the conference finals, but I think that's a long series either way. Like win or lose, I don't think that's a 4 or 5 game series the way that I think the first and second round could be. So Chicago, I think, is the team the Cavs would most want to play. They're bad. There's not a nice way to say it. Yes, the team that the Bulls put on the floor the other night against the Cavs, probably not the same team that would show up for game 1 at Rocket Arena. Like, there are guys that they had out that might be back and on the floor. But overall, that Bulls team has no chance against the Cavs. Number 2 would be the Orlando Magic. Orlando probably has the best player of this bunch in Paolo Banchero, but he's not been great Could he go out and win them a game in the playoffs? Sure. And we got a firsthand look at this last year with how good he was in the postseason against the Cavs in that 7-game series. But I don't think Orlando has the capability, especially with Jalen Suggs out, who I don't believe is coming back this year. I don't believe Orlando has the capability of defending the Cavs backcourt. And I don't think that I know for a fact that their offense is not good enough to keep up with the Cavs. I think that Orlando would be physical, and it would be a tougher physical series for the Cavs than a series against the Bulls would be. But I think that there might actually be less of a chance that Orlando wins a game in this series. I think it'd be more physical and it would be tougher. Like the wins wouldn't necessarily all look like the 40-point win the Cavs had in Orlando a couple weeks ago. But I think that these games might be a little bit more grinded out type than Chicago, which is why I have them as the number 2 team they'd want to face. But I think that there's actually a better chance, if this makes sense, I think there's a better chance that they would sweep Orlando in their current form than they would Chicago, because I think that Chicago could, in theory, get hot from 3 in a game and steal a game. And, that can happen. Orlando, I don't think, is capable of doing that. Number 3 is Atlanta. They've got Trae Young. I'm not super high on Trae Young, but Dyson Daniels is a really good perimeter defender, and he is somebody that could make life difficult in a postseason series for Darius Garland, for Donovan Mitchell, and especially with Garland, because he hasn't had these big playoff moments yet. And I do think they're coming this year, but I think that building up his postseason confidence in the first round is something that should be looked at as a big deal. Being able to have Darius Garland go off and have some big games in the first round, I think would bode really well for the Cavs getting to where they want to go this postseason. And against Atlanta, I just don't know how likely that is. Now, maybe Dyson Daniels is just glued to Donovan Mitchell, and it actually helps Darius Garland, but he'd also have to deal with old friend Karis LeVert, and of course, potential for a George Niang revenge series. And then lastly, you've got Miami. And Miami, I do think, is the most talented of the teams in this bunch. Bam Adebayo, as we saw, had a great game against the Cavs on Wednesday night. Tyler Hero's having a really, really good season. Miami is the only team in this bunch that I do think would have a coaching advantage over the Cavs, because Eric Spoelstra is one of the best. I think that the Cavs would see a lot of zone, and Miami plays zone defense better than anybody else. The Cavs would not lose this series. This Miami team is not capable of doing what the Miami team did a couple years ago, where they were an 8 seed and went to the finals. They're not capable of doing that. This is a much different Miami team. But are they capable of dragging the Cavs into the mud for 5 games and making it difficult? Yeah, I think so. I think it'd be the most physical series of the group. I think that Miami's not scared of anybody, even if they're not very good. And they've got guys that have been there and done that too. Like Bam has been to the finals. Tyler Hero's been to the finals. Andrew Wiggins won a championship in Golden State. Those things do matter a little bit. Miami's not talented enough to beat the Cavs. They're not. None of the teams that I've talked about have been. Miami doesn't have enough offensive firepower to keep up in a 7-game series. But I do think it's just something worth noting. Playing that zone defense and having to really figure that out, maybe it'd be a good thing in the long run, but I think that would be the toughest series. So if you are a Cavs fan, I think you're rooting for Miami to finish 7th, win that first play-in game, and go to Boston. And would Boston beat Miami? Yeah. But part of wanting the easiest route to the conference finals for the Cavs is wanting the inverse for the Celtics. If you're a Cavs fan, you want Boston to struggle in the first round. And Boston has, in the past, they've given games away, particularly to Miami. There's a history there. Eric Spoelstra knows how to coach against that team. I think you are rooting for the Miami Heat to finish 7th, and then whatever one of these other teams finishes 8th, I think you're probably pretty good with that. Now, the Cavs are looking to make it 13 straight wins tonight against Charlotte. Good news on the injury report, and let's take a look at when we think the next potential loss is for the Cavs, because it's not tonight against the Hornets. We'll do that next right here on Locked On Cavs. Today's show brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. When the game tips off, The NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off or you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. Plus, if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. FanDuel's live betting feature keeps every moment of the game exciting, whether you're backing your team for a late-game rally or you're picking a player to hit a clutch three. You never feel like you missed your chance. It's never too late to get in on that action. The app is very easy to use, and when you win, because let's face it, you're confident, I'm confident in you. So when you win, you're going to get paid instantly. And right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com, FanDuel.com to join today for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. You can find the show on YouTube, and if you're watching, do me a favor, hit that thumbs up button for me before we get out of here. Click subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. The Cavs are taking on the Charlotte Hornets tonight as they look to go for 13 consecutive wins. The Cavs got good news on the injury front on Thursday because as I record this, there are no injuries to report. I believe that this will be the 5th or 6th game this year that I believe the 5th. I think that against Miami, it was the 4th that the Cavs have been injury-free. You have the game against Oklahoma City, the game against New York, the game against the Celtics, and then the game against Miami. So this will be game number 5 that the Cavs have their full roster available. Charlotte, of course, not a very good team. They have I believe the worst record in the NBA, or the second worst record in the Eastern Conference and in the NBA. They're 14-47. It's been really bad. They've lost 8 straight. They're 1-9 in their last 10. They are a terrible basketball team. There's no way the Cavs are losing this game tonight. Certainly not with everybody healthy. So that leads me to the next question of, well, the Cavs have won 12 straight. I don't think that they're going to win the rest of their games. I think that they're probably going to lose another game at some point. I would suspect they might even lose 2 between now and the end of the regular season. But let's pencil in a win tonight. Then the Cavs play Milwaukee on Sunday. And that is the game that I look at and say, okay, that's a tough one. Like they might not get, that might be a loss. But you also look at it as, all right, Milwaukee's been better lately, but the Bucks haven't exactly, in my opinion, at least built the best win profile. They've won games, and give them credit because earlier in the year they were not winning games. But if you go back the last couple of weeks, what impressive wins do they have? Since going all the way back, so they started let's go back to the start of the year. They beat Toronto, bad team. San Antonio, bad team. Orlando, bad team. They lost to New York, I don't think is a great team. Beat Sacramento, that's a nice win. Beat Orlando, bad team. Toronto, bad team. Philly, bad team. Miami, not a good team. Lost to the Clippers. Utah's a bad team. Lost to Portland, San Antonio, Memphis, OKC. Beat Charlotte, bad team. Lost to Atlanta. Beat Philly, bad team. Beat Minnesota, average team. Beat the Clippers, who were playing well. That was a nice win. Beat Washington by 3, bad team. Beat Miami again, not a great team. Lost to Houston. Beat Denver, Denver's a good team, best player in the world. Basically the same thing as Milwaukee right now. They have a very similar win profile where they're just beating a bunch of bad teams. Then they beat Dallas twice, who Dallas is awful right now, and they beat Atlanta. So, okay, are the Bucks good or have the Bucks beat up on bad teams? You do give them credit for beating the teams they're supposed to beat, but they've also not been overly impressive. That said, they've got Giannis. And then on the other side, for the Bucks, this is the second game of a back-to-back. They play Orlando on Saturday and then have to turn around and play the Cavs the next night. Giannis Antetokounmpo has been on a minutes restriction. I don't know if he's going to play both sides of the back-to-back. He did just play both ends of the back-to-back against Atlanta and Dallas, but we'll see. I don't know if that's going to be the case. So if the Cavs get past that, they've got Brooklyn. That should be another game that they win in Cleveland on Tuesday night. Then they actually have 2 days off before a game in Memphis. That's probably the next tough one. Memphis could be really tough. But I do think that this winning streak could go on a ways because you've got Memphis, then Orlando, again, not a good team. The Clippers are not playing very well right now. Sacramento, solid. Phoenix is awful. The Jazz are awful. Portland is decent. San Antonio is awful. Like this winning streak, and the Cavs are going to have an off night and they're going to lose a game. But the schedule is shaping up for this to potentially be. And I think a lot of this has to do with getting past Sunday, maybe even getting back past Tuesday and having back-to-back days off. But this winning streak could potentially be the longest one of the season for them, which is crazy because they've already had a 15-game winning streak. But I do think that that's kind of the territory that we are entering with this winning streak. Just looking at the schedule and the fact that the Cavs have been able to find ways to win games when they haven't played their best. If that continues, or if after a couple of days off, they start playing better basketball, this winning streak could go on quite a while. There will be a bonus episode of Locked on Cavs later today. Talks with Tony Cartagena about the Milwaukee Bucks. He covers the team up there in Milwaukee. So we talked about what a potential playoff series would look like, what the Bucks have looked like lately, kind of a lot of what I just said in this segment, but from a much more detailed look from a guy that is around the team much more frequently than I am. So that'll come your way a little bit later on this afternoon. You don't want to miss that. So in order to not miss that, what you have to do is subscribe to the podcast anywhere you get it, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Hit a 5-star rating, leave a nice review, be a friend, tell a friend about Locked on Cavs. If you have a Cavs friend in your life that needs a Cavs podcast, this is the one. And if you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor, hit that thumbs up button for me, click subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked on Cavs content. I'll be back tomorrow talking about the game against Charlotte.